Far Side Movie Reviews.
All right, Farsiders. So here we go. I just got back from seeing The Shack. So before we get started, guys, I need you to give me a little bit of latitude, right? Give me some leeway, because I'm going to just kind of talk about this thing in kind of like a free fashion, because I have a lot of thoughts about it. So bear with me, all right? So, The Shack. I'm going to give you a brief synopsis. How about we just start there? Something very, very brief, very generic, so it doesn't mess anyone up or spoil anything for anybody that's looking to see this film. The Shack is about a man that is grieving. One day he finds a letter in his mailbox that's marked from God, and it says, "Meet me at the Shack." So you can't get any more generic than that, right? No spoilers in there, that is for sure. So this movie actually has a pretty decent cast. It stars Octavia Spencer, Sam Worthington, as well as TIm Mcgraw. And what did I think about The Shack? And so it's almost really hard to say, because this is not a very good movie. And when I say that, I feel heavy, because I feel like if you're watching this video, that's not what you wanted to hear, but you wanted to hear how good this movie is. But guys, I have to be honest in my assessment of it. This is not a very good film, and it actually hurts me to say so, because I'm someone that really enjoyed the book. I thought it was a very, very powerful narrative, and I was really excited to see how this film would adapt to the big screen. But this is one of those cases where sometimes it's really hard to take a narrative, especially if it's a very powerful written narrative, and transfer it to the big screen. Sometimes book to film adaptations don't work, and The Shack is an example of this with the way that this particular film was done. Now I'm going to talk about in a little bit what should have happened here to really give this film a lot more of what it needed to kind of have the impact that most of us were hoping that it was going to have. I don't know, maybe when you see it, it will have that impact for you, and God knows if it does. Please come back and share with the community what you thought about it if you have an opposing view from my own. So the performances, let's just kind of start there. So we'll kind of break up some little pieces of what I thought were problem areas, and then I'll talk about how I thought that this film could have been a lot better and why it was not as good as it could have been. So the performances in this film were just okay, and it was a lot less impactful than what I thought it would be. I mean, Sam Worthington is a great actor. Octavia Spencer, Academy Award winner, and TIm Mcgraw. Well, he's TIm Mcgraw. I mean, you know, he's no Golden Glober or anything like that. But when I saw who was in this film, I thought, wow, okay, we got some star power in here, which I think is definitely needed for a film like this to come across well. So I thought that it was going to be pretty good, but it wasn't. I mean, there was a lot of things that kind of fell flat in this film. The performances were just average at best, and at some points they were just bad. Even with Octavia and Sam, they were just not good. The film really tries to kind of set up this emotional connection, but it falls flat. It doesn't really do that either, and it paces very slowly in the beginning. So what needed to happen here was we really needed to see a little bit more relationship building with Sam's family before the film kind of tracks further into the narrative, to really kind of tie us into the folks that are involved in the tragedy within this film. But we don't really get that. It tries to do that with some of the camera work and then just kind of some of the tone and the feel of the film, but it never really comes across. And that's a big problem for this movie, because if you have read the book, then you know how gripping this story is. You know how much this story pulls on your heartstrings, sucks you in. This story creates an emotional field around the reader of the narrative that is undeniably powerful. And the film needed to capture this, and it doesn't do it, and it never really does it all the way through. Though it tries to do it through some powerful imagery, some of the things that we've read in the book that we were excited about seeing on the big screen, the movie does try and pull that off. But the problem is it doesn't really come off with the same impact as the written narrative, because just visually it's just not as powerful. In terms of the performances, it's not as powerful. It's not directed as well. So it has all of these different holes that really make this film kind of fall flat of the expectation I know that I had, and I'm betting of the expectation that you have as well when you see this film. So there were just so many problems with it. We talked a little bit about the performances. The directing was really bad. As a matter of fact, there is one I mean, it's actually funny because it's so stark. There is a jump cut in this film that's so stark, I mean so blatant. I mean, the cut is so strong that it's one of those like things that makes you do a double take. Like you see it and you're just like, because it's that strong. It's almost like one of those things like, wow, you know what, they missed that in editing. That is the only way possible that cut is in this movie, is somebody made an editing mistake and it already rolled out and it was too late to fix. I mean, that's how glaring that cut was. But the transition, just visually how that film was shot in other ways as well, it just wasn't remarkable like the book is. So that was part of it as well. The cinematography was okay. There were some scenes in there that were beautiful to look at, that were visually a bit stunning, but nowhere on the scale of what we had hoped to see from the book adaptation. And then there are some times when we kind of have the different things in the books that really kind of strike us with kind of visual imagery that we create in our minds when we're reading the books. Those things that we're excited about seeing on the screen. There's one character in the film that in the book has these certain characteristics, and if you wonder how that's going to come across in the movie, it doesn't come across well. It almost looks like some kind of cheap special effect, and it really does look that way. And it was a little bit frustrating because what I felt like was the director and the cinematographer, they kind of knew the things that we were looking for in this movie. They knew the things that we wanted to see, and they felt like they had to give it to us. Like they were like, well, we know that some of these characters have certain characteristics, so boom, we're just going to give them, a flash of these kind of spectacular characteristics, and boom, there you go. We put it in the movie. It was in the book. We know you guys want to see it. We put it in the movie, but it's just not done well at all. And I checked out some of the reviews before I hopped on to give you my own reviews, and it's not getting good remarks, and I'm not surprised by that. So, before we talk about some of the things that I think could have made this movie better, I do want to highlight at least one good thing about this film that I do think was notable, and I think that for those of us who are fans of the book, you guys will enjoy this. It does stick pretty closely to how the book or how the narrative is done in the book. It doesn't veer too much from that, and it does give us a lot of highlights from the narrative in the book. So there are a lot of things that you would be looking for to see in this film that's from the book that you will see in this film. The unfortunate part is that it's just not done very well. So all in all, this was not a very enjoyable movie. So let me talk about the problem with The Shack, why The Shack is so difficult to make. Because the written narrative of The Shack is so powerful, and the imagery that you create in your mind when you're reading this book is kind of set a certain way, and it might be different for different readers, it is very, very hard to have that adaptation come across on the big screen and show like you would expect for it to show. Because the narrative is written in such a powerful way, and the narrative prompts such vivid imagery within our own minds when we're reading the story, to kind of have that show on the big screen is a very difficult task to pull off for a lot of different reasons. Number one, we might kind of all visualize it a bit differently, even though the word imagery does kind of frame what we're seeing in our minds as we're reading the narrative. But in terms of the scope of how big this book is, and you know what I'm talking about if you've read it, the images created in the mind as you're reading the text really are spectacular, and they are very difficult to pull off from book to big screen unless you have certain things in place. So let me tell you what I think really needs to be in place to make a movie like The Shack work. So number one, let's start with star power. You almost need a star in every role in The Shack. If you kind of think about Ocean's 11, where you had 6 or 7, 8 stars in that movie, well, The Shack kind of needs something like that, because every character in the written narrative of The Shack feels important. So if you are going to create a movie, then every character in that movie really needs to be almost an A-list actor, even if they have a very, very small part, very, very small screen time, because that's the only way that you are going to pull off a similar dynamic of the characters that you see in the written narrative, because of how powerfully they're written. I hope this is making sense to you. So when you try and transfer that character power from the written narrative to the big screen, you can't really hang your hat on 2-star actors. And I think Sam Worthington and of course Octavia Spencer are great actors, but even those two together do not have the star power enough to pull this movie off and give it the emotional kick and acting chops that it requires, because of what I said before. Because when you read the narrative, every character in that narrative is important. Every character in that story is important because of the way that it's written. So if you want that same effect on the big screen, you've got to get stars almost in very, very small roles. Stars that are willing to take the small roles to really pull off the story in a way that's engaging, gripping, and emotionally just vibrant. And this movie doesn't do that. And as I said again, Sam and Octavia just don't pull this off well enough. They can't. You gotta have that holistic kind of star power cast. I'm beating a dead horse, but I'm telling you, that's what's necessary, number one, to make a movie like this successful. Number two, you have to have a very, very talented director. A director that really is going to be able to maximize the cast to create the film that we're hoping for from the book. So that being said, you have to have a director that really kind of understands the idea and the context of the story. To me, it would have had to have been a director that really spent some time speaking to Young, the author of the book, to really get an idea for the feel of the characters and really be able to take that and translate that vision to the big screen. You have to have a director that understands this story. And I would dare even say a director that has read the story more than once or understands it more than just from the idea of, I'm going to make a movie out of a book that was very popular because I think that it will do very well. This narrative really kind of grips people, so the director has to kind of really be in touch with the feel, the tone of the story, and be able to pull all of that out of his actors to get this story to transition and relate well on the big screen. Number three, you've got to have a very, very talented cinematographer. Because the visuals in The Shack are so dynamic when you are reading them, you've got to have a talented cinematographer that's able to bring those visuals across on the big screen without them looking cheesy, without them kind of not making visual sense, and with them being cohesive with the performances and the direction of the film. The Shack is not an easy movie to create for a cinematographer, because you can't just throw cinematic devices in the movie and make it pop. Everything has to work together. The performances, the directing, the cinematography, all of it has to work together if you're going to get kind of this grand dynamic film that we were hoping to get for those of us who love the books. So those are really the elements that you need to make this movie do very well. If you get those things, then I think this movie could be great. And I don't foresee anybody remaking this movie, but if they did, and you got A-list actors for even the smallest parts, folks that were willing to do that, you got a good director that really understood the story and the characters and the context and the feel of the tone of the written narrative and was really able to push his actors to bring that vision to the big screen. And then you got a talented cinematographer that was really able to do a good job of pulling off the visual imagery that The Shack brings up when you are reading the narrative. Then you could really have a film that I think would blow a lot of people away, that I think actually would be attractive to a lot of people that weren't even Christian. I mean, by and large, this is a movie that most of the moviegoers that see this movie are going to be Christian. But if you could pull something off like that, then I think that you probably would get an even broader audience seeing this film. Because the thing about The Shack, as I've said kind of in my trailer review, is that whether or not you are somebody that believes in God, or you're somebody that just considers yourself spiritual or what have you, the questions that are posed in this narrative, I'm sure are questions that a lot of people have asked. And maybe they've led them towards God, maybe they've led them away from God. But the questions or the subject tackled in this film and in the narrative, the book, are questions that a lot of people have asked themselves. And that's why this film does kind of have a broader appeal, even though I think that the mass audience that see this film are probably going to be Christians. So guys, I have said a lot about The Shack. Oh man, it's hard for me to really give you a suggestion about what to do here. I think that if you've enjoyed the narrative, if you've read the book, if you've listened to the book and you enjoyed it, go see the movie. Maybe you will think that its translation to the big screen is a lot better than what I've said. But for me, I was not happy with this movie, and I'm almost tempted to tell you to save your money. But I don't know, you know. If you're bent on seeing it, check it out, and maybe you'll think differently. If so, please come back and share with the community your thoughts. If you thought I was wrong, tell me why I was wrong at certain points, or what you liked and what you didn't like, or what you thought worked and why I was wrong about me not thinking that certain things worked. I know this is not a spoiler review, but I have said a lot. So guys, I'm definitely interested on hearing your comments. I don't know. I just wish that this would have been a lot better. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for taking the time out to listen to this. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. You guys know that I love you, and thank you so much for those of you guys who subscribe of helping the channel hit 400 subscribers. We are going to do a channel Q&A where you can ask me anything you want, coming up very, very soon. And with that, guys, thank you so much as always. And if you like this, please make sure that you give it a thumbs up. And guys, please make sure that you comment, share your thoughts on The Shack if you've seen it in the comments below. Dying to hear what your thoughts are. Guys, if you are new here, please make sure that you subscribe. You can hit that button that says subscribe, and there's some text down at the bottom as well that you can hit to subscribe to the channel. Guys, again, thank you so much. There is more that I've done recently floating on the screen somewhere. Check that out. And with that, I will see you on the next video.